Okay, so let's talk about hashing today. Hashing and hash. So what is the cryptographic hash functions? Okay, the cryptographic hash function is a hash function. It's a function, right? Basically, which takes data as an input and calculate the fixed size string of bytes. And the string is called hash value, message digest, or checksum, right? Before we talk about this hash function, so let's just talk about functions, for example, right? The function first. Okay, the function, right? You know the function. It's, for example, we can think function as a black box. Oops. So you can think function as a black box. So this is, let's say, function f. And then these functions usually take multiple inputs, actually one or more inputs. Typically one or maybe two, right? But could be like 4 or 5 inputs, right? And so let's say this input is x1 and x2, and then it's typically generate one output, let's say one or one, right? So this, right, we can if I use a notation, right, math notation, this means O1 is output, right, and function f, and take 2 inputs, right? So we learn encryption algorithms, right? So encryption algorithm, like symmetric encryption algorithm, so we use following notation, right? E as encryptions, and the message M, plain text M, and then our shared key, right? And then it generates what? Ciphertext, right? So we can, so this also you can think this is a functions, right? So let's say this is a functions. Name of the function is E, right? It's encryptions. And what is our input? Plain text M. And then what? The shared key. And then it generates what? Ciphertext, right? So then what is a hash functions? Hash function is a functions, right? So typically they use notation H. This function H takes data, or you can think as like a text, right? Just a text message, and then generates, right? Generates what? This output, right? This output is called hash value, or what? Message digest, right? Hash value or the message digest. Okay, so ideal hash functions properties is follow: easy to calculate for any data provided, and very difficult to find alphanumeric text that has a given hash. And it's extremely unlikely to find the same hash for the different data, right? So let's just formalize the this statement, right? Let's just use a little bit of notation. So given message M and arbitrary length, right? M of arbitrary length. So this is like a text. And hash function H generates a fixed length of output H. So basically, you can think as what? You can think it's there is what? There's a hash functions H. Okay, so they use hash function H and generate a fixed length of output H. So they use H as hash functions, and then this H is the output is hash value, and then message M of arbitrary length. So that is the input. So M is just arbitrarily any message of arbitrary length, and h is a function which takes m as an input and generate h, which is a hash value, or we can call it hash or hash value or message digest, right? So that's how this is the expression. So hash function is one way it satisfies the following. Given m and h, right? Given m and given h. So let me just write. So here is the function h, and then there's an input m, and then there's h, right? This is output. Given m and h, so given m and h, it's easy to compute h. So it's relatively compute the hash value, right? So that's what I mean by easy to compute h, right? It's once you give this text message, plain text message, you'll easily generate the h. And given h and h, so now, so what is given? What is given is this hash function, right? Hash functions and then hash value, this hash value, right? It's very hard to make a right guess, right? What m is really. Okay. So for example, I show you one example. So if you go to any like in the Google, right? You can search a website, right? Online, which show you a couple of hash functions, so you can compute hash value. So let's see. Where is it? Let's see. Oh, okay. So this is like an online website. So I'll just put, so data mean, in our case, this data is m, right? So I'll say I love flowers, right? So this is the plain text message, and then I'm gonna use a hash. It's one of, like, MD5 is one of the common hash algorithm. So basically what I'm going to do is, for example, right now what I'm going to do is, here's hash functions MD5, right? And then as an input, I'll say I love flowers, right? And then I like to get the hash value or a message digest. That's what I'm trying to do right now. So I love flowers, right? And calculate MD5 hash, and I get, this is my hash value. Okay, so the second property said, given h, small h, which is hash value and hash function, it's hard to compute m. So what that means is, it's not really reversible. By looking at this hash value, right, it is almost impossible for you to get this plain text. So by just looking at this hash value, right, you cannot make the right guess, right? So you really cannot recover the plain text. And this mean by is really one-way functions, right? So like this is like one way, right? And never goes this way. You know, given this message digest and MD5, you cannot recover a plain text. So no. So this is the second property. The third property says, given m and h, it is hard to compute m prime such that hm prime is equal to hm. This means if this happens, then this is like collision occurs, right? Collisions. So what that means is, for example, and by by the way, there's one thing that I'd like to show you is if I just change small value, right? I'm gonna just remove just S, just one letter. I love flower, right? So I'm going to calculate the hash value, but remember the previous value, right? When I have a S plural, my hash value is starting from A494, right? And blah blah blah, right? A494. But if I just remove S, A494, when I calculate the MD5 hash value, it totally changes. Now it's starting from 4D, right? So it generates completely different hash value. Just minor change, right? But you have a big change in output. So this is something called, I think, the avalanche effect. But anyway, so this is really good hash algorithm, MD5. It's not the really best, but it's relatively okay. So one-way hash function, okay, so let me just finish this and then I'll go back to this property number 3. One-way hash function can be used to provide the signature or the fingerprints. So this is the fingerprints, right, for this message. But as you know, that this hash value is always fixed length. For example, when I put really like a long text message, right? I'm gonna still, the output is, of course, is different, but it's like I think this is 128 bits probably. So this is like, it's really fixed, right? Size of the output, this size of the message digest is always the same, right? Okay. So this is a fingerprint. This is a fingerprint of this text message. And let's talk about the collision. So the property number 3 is also known as collision resistance. Okay. So let's talk about collision. Okay. The collision. So the collision resistance means, let's say, okay, so let's say, so if you, okay, so let's say I have a message M, right? And then I'm going to use hash functions, right? So let's say I use hash functions H. I'm going to use the notation that you use in the slide. So H, right? And then finally, if you hash this message M, you will get message digest. Let's say H. So this is a value that you get. But you use the same hash functions, H. So let's say this is H1 and this is H1. To basically to show that this is same hash function, exactly same hash functions. And then I use a different, let's say, different message. So for example, this one, I'll say flower, right? Let's say M prime is, let's say, cats, right? If this hash functions generate exactly same message digest, although you use a totally two different message, right? And then if this hash function generate the same hash value, same message digest, then this is what? This is a collision. And which is really bad, right? So the good hash function, right? The good hash functions should have the property called collision resistance, meaning that these hash functions, right? These hash functions should work in such a way that it should not generate the same hash value if two messages are different, right? And then you should not generate the same message digest, because collision is really bad, right? So this is like what third property is really telling you. Given M and H, it's hard to find another message that generate the same hash value. So that is known as a collision resistance. Okay. Now, next case, the common hash algorithms is MD5, right? And then it's always generate 128-bit hash value, right? And then there is another hash algorithms called the SHA-1 and SHA-2 and SHA-3, SHA-3. And this one it's probably the best hashing algorithms. So basically, MD5 is kind of old, but it's okay. But SHA is better, right, than MD5, and it's stronger, right? And SHA-2 is now finally SHA-3 is the best hashing algorithms. Okay, and now the next one. So what is the goal? What is the main goal of hashing? So main goal of hashing is conforming what? Integrity. So that's the most important. So hashing is not for the confidentiality, right? Hashing is for what? Hashing is for the integrity of the data. So in the next lecture, I show you the example, right? I show you one scenario and why hashing can be used for the data integrity. Okay, thank you.